Welcome to this episode of the Be Raire Podcast with me, Jessica Kimber, founder of Raire. And today we have Marcus Cazilieris. Welcome, Marcus.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you so much for joining me today. And as you know, this podcast is all about teaching recruiters how they can be rare, be unique, be different, and how they can stand out in a competitive market. And I love your story. I think, you've done very, very well in the recruitment space, and you're 2.5 years into your career at the moment, and a lot of success stories. So we'll definitely be diving into that a lot deeper. But what I wanted to know firstly, Marcus, is a bit about you and your story and how did you even get into recruitment in the first place?
Yeah, my story and how I got into recruitment are probably two mildly different things. My story, I guess I come from a background of leaving high school after year 10, going into a diploma of business. And basically at that time I was working at, hospitality, working at McDonald's at the time. And I got a little bit over basically getting paid based on age instead of skill set experience, working next to someone who works just as hard as I do, or I work just as hard as they do. And knowing that they're getting paid a lot more just because they're older, without any, reference to ability, skill set, experience, and that kind of stuff. So I started chasing and made it a goal of mine to find a job that would pay me based on skill set and experience and equal to everyone else with the same rather than based on age. So that led me to sales. So I did a variety of different sales roles for a few years. And then I got drawn into recruitment basically due to the couple of things. Obviously the financial aspect of the recruitment space and the potential of that was second to none in sales outside of tech, potentially in some spaces, but that's a different kettle of fish. And then obviously, it's a two-way sales approach as well, which I liked. An enhanced skill set teaches you to do something different versus all the other sales roles that are out there, which is just selling a product to one customer. Recruitment, you're selling a job to a person and, a person to a company in the best way possible. As well as the fact that most recruitment agencies, foster and try their best to have a fun environment that takes care of their staff and put all those things together. I was like, I'd love to try that. And then didn't get it when I was looking for work once, but when I was looking for work the next time, I thought I'd just look exclusively for recruitment jobs, and, minimize applying for jobs outside of that space as much as I can, and then managed to find something and then went for it. It's been great ever since.
Amazing. And that was about 2.5 years ago. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. Amazing. So when you were in sales, which industries were you in, or what were you selling?
I've done a few things in sales. I've done a couple months or a few months. This would have been 8 years ago when I first started doing like direct marketing, which is like commission only, face-to-face sales, door knocking in car parks. There's annoying people that come up to you in shopping centers. When I was like 16. I moved on to a freight forwarding role for a few months. That wasn't the greatest. And then I got into car sales where I was there for about 9 months. That was probably my first like real serious one where I got a lot out of it. I put a lot into it. That was very enjoyable in all aspects. Just not the industry I was super keen about. Moved on to tobacco for 2.5 years, give or take, across 2 different roles and 2 different states. Based in New South Wales, got promoted, went up to Queensland for 2 years or 1.5 years. And then from tobacco moved into recruitment.
Yeah, wow, I love that. I feel like you've had a lot of character building jobs as well, right? The door knocking is probably the hardest type of sales, well, in my opinion. I actually did that for like 1 week before when I was like 17 or something like that. It's definitely not on my LinkedIn profile, but I did, and it was horrendous. I was so bad at it.
I did 2 weeks in like a fundraising thing as well. That was like, they go around to different areas. So we spent like a couple weeks, 4 hours out of New South Wales or something like that. And it was just terrible. It was the same sort of thing. You're standing outside a store and you go up to people and smile and all that kind of stuff. And like stop them and ask them to donate and stuff. Good cause and all that kind of stuff. But it's just wasn't for me. So
yeah, that's sad. Yeah. I think those type of jobs are great for learning the skill of sales, but then there's other career paths that I think you can get a lot more out of. And yeah, look, it sounds like that's been very similar to what you've done. I'm super intrigued as well, though, because I think you are somebody who at a very young age has built a career for themselves, and you in a position now where you're setting yourself up, which is amazing to hear. So in terms of, I guess, like the opportunities that recruitment has brought to you, what would those be?
like recruit experiences for outside of workspace?
Just in terms of setting yourself up in life, because I know that it was obviously your goal and priority from a young age is to, diversify your income, and so you can actually then, build your wealth. So what has that looked like for you?
I mean, for me, my biggest goal ever since I was probably 12 to 15 was to get into property and all that kind of stuff. And everything I've wanted to do career-wise has been based around achieving that the best way possible. As I continue to grow, my goals expand, and now I've got some pretty hefty goals, some big, hairy, audacious ones to try to hit. So I've always kind of been drawn to the financial aspect. I was going to mention before, but when I was like 14 and younger, I originally wanted to be a carpenter. That was what I really wanted to do because I really enjoyed woodwork in high school. But because I left and I couldn't be bothered to do a trade for the money side of things, I decided to go to business and sales, and worked out really, really well. I'm very happy about it, but interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess the aspect of recruitment and that side of things has definitely helped to just give me the financial funnel that I need to be able to hit my goals outside of the workspace and in my personal life, whether that's my personal investing through shares or other avenues, as well as property, which is what matters most. I mean, you've got good salaries, great commission structures and stuff like that you can take advantage of, that all, borrowing capacity, paying for deposits. And once you get your first property, you can basically just get into your second through equity, as long as you've got the borrowing capacity for it, and then third and fourth and so on and so forth. There's different structures. It gets very complex beyond that, but
yeah, wow, that's so inspiring. Though I read somewhere, or it was on a news channel, something along the lines of, if you want to buy a property in Sydney, it's going to take an average Gen Zer 46 years to purchase their first property, or something along those lines. It was like crazy numbers, and it just makes it so out of reach for so many people. And it's like you're living proof as how old are you again? 23, is that right? Yeah. Just 24. So you're living proof as someone in their early 20s. That's not always the case. And actually, you can definitely get into a role like recruitment, where the harder that you work and the more input that you put in, the bigger the output as well. So I think, when you first got into recruitment, is that what you expected? Did you expect the earning potential to be as high as what it actually is?
Yes and no. I knew the earning potential of it. I knew the structure of it through interviews and stuff like that. You see how it works, the potential with the commission structures, all that kind of stuff. But you see every sales role that has, a base of 60 to 80K or whatever it might be, and then a non-target earning of 200 to 300K. And it's like, you see some of them that are just kind of, out of the realms of what the average person will make in the role. They're not on target earnings. You're a really high achiever, aspirational ones. Recruitment, for the most part, you generally have the ability to do that, and you've got full control of being able to do that. In most companies, you've got the complete freedom to build your own clients, build your own desk, charge fees that may suit yourself and the clients and the industry that you're in, and all that kind of stuff. So the potential really is there. Whereas I think with a lot of product-based sales stuff, there are external limitations that impact it a lot more, whether that's the business's fundamentals, or the business's operations, or supply chain, or whatever it might be that kind of interferes with it. You've got complete control. You can find your candidate, you can find a client, you put 2 and 2 together, and you've got 10 to 30 grand placement depending on the job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, wow, I love that. When you say it like that, it's like, what, we actually do have such a good profession. It's tough sometimes, though. Obviously, you're such an ambitious and goal-driven person, and I'm sure that being so self-motivated, that keeps you going on those difficult days. But they come, and they happen to everyone. So what do you do on those days where just nothing's going right? No candidate answers the phone. Every client says no. Like, how do you manage that?
Have a laugh with a colleague for number one, because everyone goes through it in the recruitment space, and you talk to your person on your left and you talk to your person on the right, and everyone knows what it's like, and everyone's been there, and you just feel like it's just another day in recruitment. And if you've had some success in the space, you've generally got a lot of optimism to build on as well. Off days and off months that are inevitable at the end of the day. I think it's sometimes a bit tougher to escape the headspace, but if you're in a good environment, you've got, management who will sit down with you and help you go through your emotions a little bit more, and go through it. And then you've got colleagues that can help as well. So there. But I think the most important thing is just to understand why you're doing it and what it is you're doing it for. And it makes it a lot easier to pick up the phone call and make the next call. And every call has the same likelihood of going well and going badly. You can have 10 10 bad calls or conversations, or 10 deals fall through, or whatever it might be, and the next one has just as much likelihood of going through as succeeding as it does failing, regardless of the other results.
So the more no's you get, the closer you get to your yes as well, right? So you just got to keep going in this space. In terms of the market that you're recruiting in at the moment, what desks do you look after?
I do a bit of everything, predominantly
Okay.
blue collar kind of space. I have a bit of a dual desk that unintentionally became a dual desk. I was brought on to do blue collar labor hire stuff. Worked really well with some clients. They changed their needs. We aligned well with them, and basically my desk turned into a bit more of a dual desk that's still predominantly across the blue collar space with blue collar clients, within building, construction, warehousing, manufacturing, engineering kind of space. But yeah, has tended to be a bit of a dual desk.
That's fun though, because you can pivot with whatever the market's doing. I've heard the construction space is having a little bit of a tough time at the moment. So I feel like at least if you've got other options, you're like, you know what, I'll focus on that, and you can still hit your billing targets quite easily. I'm curious to know, because I know in that blue collar space, the KPIs are very different to any other desk, to be quite honest. What kind of KPIs do you typically work towards? Like, what's a normal set of numbers that you would hit per month?
We're not a very KPI driven business. There's not heaps of KPIs. The main thing that we look at as a business is our labor hire numbers, whether that's revenue and GP and workers out, on a monthly basis, as well as for perm, obviously your perm fees, and then sales numbers, which might be, what kind of leads are you bringing in, how many agreements might you be sending out, that kind of stuff. But we look at it more from an arching perspective or an overall perspective than, saying you need to do, 5 new workers out every week, 10 out, X, Y, and Z. We have like baselines that we work towards, but they're not really so much KPIs. Our KPIs are our, thresholds and commission sets and all that kind of stuff, as well as, where we might have been the last month and that, to try to obviously get some growth as much as we can, as best as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general recruitment, we're moving away from that more transactional model, and it is becoming more outcome driven, which I think is music to a lot of people's ears. However, I do think there is some agencies out there that definitely can struggle with that side of things, because they're used to saying, well, here's our methodology and it works. If you meet these activity numbers, you're going to achieve this. But yeah, I definitely see that changing. And that's why I was curious to know about the blue collar space, because I feel like that's the space you'd probably make the most calls. Like, I've actually got a client who's in the blue collar space, and their standard amount of calls is like 50 a day. And I find that so high. I don't know if that's still high to what other agencies are measuring by, but I find that really, really high in this current market. But look, every company operates differently. So yeah, look, that all makes sense. In terms of, I guess, like managing those volumes though, so I know each day probably looks a little bit different, but like what's your strategy to stay on top of so many moving parts on such a busy desk?
Yeah, I think it's definitely all about prioritization with what you have to do and what you're working towards. So we're obviously working towards achieving, doing sales, getting new business, as well as working on our current account management side of things, as well as, filling our roles. And that's kind of what we need to do. So it's about balancing our time every day between those things. So prioritization becomes a big part. If I've got CVs out to all my jobs and all my clients that I'm currently recruiting for, then I've got some time to sort of go on to, sales and that kind of stuff. Account management kind of happens as you go throughout the process on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. You have to manage your current accounts and current workers every day. And a lot of that stuff comes in between the rest of it. So, you go, it comes. But yeah, definitely fulfilling the roles, especially when you've got, 30 to 50 roles like I've sometimes had. You definitely just have to work on the prioritization aspect of things and just know what's going to have the basically best return, as black and white as it sounds. Most likely to have a return, whether it's, responsive clients or whatever it might be, responsive candidates, however that might work for the individual recruiter. But yeah, that's definitely important. There's no point working on a role and sending 15 candidates over to a client who's not taking 2 weeks to get back to you, where 13 of those candidates are going to be gone when you've got a client who responds immediately.
In your space, is it correct that it moves so fast as well? Like within 1 week, all of the candidates will be gone if the client doesn't make a decision? Is that how it still works?
Yeah, for a lot of the blue collar labor hire stuff, definitely. A lot of the blue collar permanent stuff, a little bit less so. It's quite like that, but it's a bit different, a little bit less fast-paced as a necessity for it. At the moment, with the current market, it's a little bit different as well. People aren't getting snatched up as quickly. When it was as busy as it was, say 6 months ago or something, you'd have people snapped up by the end of the day.
Yeah,
you still have
wow.
it. It's not as bad as it was last year.
Does that make your job easier or harder as a recruiter?
When it's busy, I think it makes it depends on how you manage it, I think.
Yeah.
Because I think if you have a good relationship with your clients and you're transparent with them about, and, make them understand that they do need to act quickly, and, if they lose a candidate because they weren't fast enough to respond, and they're aware of why that's happened, in the nicest way that you can tell them that, it helps to build the relationship that you need to do your best job as a recruiter for them and for their benefit as well. And a lot of people get that, and it really, really helps to get them to work faster and basically get us to fill as many roles as we can as quickly as possible without losing many workers.
Comes all back down to that consultative part of our role, right? The advisory part of our position, so important no matter what desk that you recruit. When you have like 30 to 50 roles on your dash, which is actually just insane, I actually want to know, number one, how your memory works, because how do you keep track of like every single person in that pipeline? Like, are you a super user of your CRM, or do you have another method? Because I definitely need some tips of staying organized with my candidates in my pipeline, because I use my CRM, but I feel like there's like loose conversations like in the background. So what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, look, I try to, so basically I can't really summarize it as much as I'd like to, but you've got Seek for starters, which keeps track of every candidate for every job that you utilize. A lot of CRMs do that, but I prefer to just use Seek because it's a lot simpler for the most part. You've got job XYZ for client XYZ. You've got 40 applicants. You've shortlisted the ones that you've presented, and those are the ones that you've presented. You can also move them to interview and everything from there, so you know which ones are what. When you send a candidate over, you obviously want to put the necessary and right information. And for the most part, that should be the information that you get and that you send is the important stuff, especially if you're, trying to make the best image for your candidates, while having the best relationship with your clients by, having that transparency piece. So I think all that kind of goes into it. But at the same time, when I had, like, for example, 35, 50 roles on, between that kind of range, it was between probably about 10 to 12 different clients. More so probably 6 to 10 clients, probably 8 to 15 sites, if that makes sense. I got some. So it's a lot easier to track that way, because I'd send a few candidates over a day or a couple of days, for example. And at the end of that, when I'm trying to follow up on them, I would send them a summary email that has all of the candidates put together and a summary of each candidate in a very well structured email to make it easier. Because I don't want to go through to find 10 emails or 15 emails. I just put it all into one email, make their life a lot easier. And then you've got your track on where everyone is, or all the candidates that you've spoken to, and that kind of aspect as well.
Sounds like you've got a good little system in place. It's all kind of flowing in and working for you, which is so
very
important.
Organized organization.
Yeah. It is. It's definitely my downfall. I'll be honest. It's something I always try. I try and be like an organizational person that's like got everything done in advance. But yeah, my to-do list is always like this long. So it's a constant battle of getting back to everyone when you're supposed to. It's so intriguing to me, because I've actually managed blue collar. I started my recruitment career in blue collar, actually. So I used to recruit for aviation, but it was more so like mechanics for the aircraft, fitters for the aircrafts. And I don't know if I was more organized then than I am now, but back then I was like handling it so well. I was sending people like overseas to like go and fix these aircrafts. Whereas now I look at those kind of volumes and I'm like, wow, that's insane that people sit on like 50 roles at once. So yeah, it's inspirational to hear.
I definitely think it's one of those things that you just find a way to manage, you figure out a solution based on the struggle that you're in and that you adapt to. And then you go out of it and you go to somewhere different, it becomes, hard to imagine how you did it. Like now I've got 8 to 15 roles on with, quite hefty roles, which is good. But I look back to when I had those and I have the same question. I'm like, how did I manage it? How did I fill so many roles so fast?
You just wing it at the time, right? You just got to get it done. So it happens somehow. No, exactly. That's so good. I also wanted to speak to you as well about, because you've got such a solid sales background and recruitment, there's so many similarities, but at the same time, it's definitely different. And it's more so comes down to that like two-way sales cycle where your product can say no as well.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to chat about is, in terms of recruitment versus sales, what do you think is like an easier sell? Do you think selling a product is easier, or do you think recruitment is actually easier?
I think baseline, what's easier is selling a product.
Mm.
I mean, you can never run out of a product. It's always there, you know, you have to find it. You know, that kind of stuff is very different. The other side of it too is foundationally, selling a product is very black and white to what it is. You've got features, benefits, advantages. That's what a pitch is based on. And granted, you have that with candidates and people, but it's people. Like there's personality, there's culture, there's environment, there's experience, there's career breaks, there's everything to sort of work towards, you know, for different candidates, different roles. All that kind of stuff, which is a whole lot of color to add to the black and white that is product selling. Product selling has a lot of color. This is just oversimplification for the purpose of this conversation, but very, very different in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm experiencing that at the moment as well, because I only started Rare a year ago, but I've been recruiting for 16 years. And that's all I knew was recruitment. And now I sell a service as well. I'm like, this is kind of easier because it's like the service doesn't change. The service is there and it's the way it's supposed to be. And then you get your interest. So yeah, I'm on this little journey at the moment of like discovering which sales roles versus recruitment roles are the ones that, you know, they're the best ultimately. So yeah, so interesting.
Become like an expert in it, you know, absolutely there is to know about it. You know, generally if you're selling something, hopefully if you know, you're passionate about what you're selling as well, like, you know, you believe in the aspect of people having it as well for them personally or their business, whatever kind of sales it might be. Whereas with recruitment, obviously, you know, want them to have a benefit to having the candidate and that kind of stuff. Otherwise, you're probably not doing your job right. But the other structures and the other stuff are different because, you know, it's always a different person, it's a different candidate, it's a different aspect. While the recruitment foundation stuff doesn't change, who you're talking about changes. You know, you might work with 30 candidates on a week or 25 candidates in a week, however many it may be, depending on the week. 20 different products at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yes, so true. In terms of that sales side of things, I also think this is something that a lot of recruiters do struggle with. Like there's so many recruiters, the natural path of when you start your career is you go into resourcing or delivery and then you work your way up to consultant. Some people with sales backgrounds, they'll definitely just go straight into consultant, but it's not as common. And I think because of that, there's definitely the training side of things lacks a little bit in our industry, just generally speaking. So as someone like yourself that's very, very skilled in sales, I wanted to get some of your ideas on techniques such as, let's start with objection handling. Like, do you have a set process that you follow? Like, let's just say you go out, you're in a client meeting, there's objections, which naturally there is in pretty much any call, any meeting that we have in our role. Do you have like a standard process that you follow in order to help move that client through the process so that you can actually get sign off to work with them?
I think it's hard to have a specific process in place for objections in any kind of sales, whether you're selling a product, a candidate, or a service. I mean, in the aspect that you just talked, it's obviously selling a service rather than an individual product, which is a different thing to actually selling a product in itself. Because you need a client to have a need for it. You need them to you know, be open to the use of recruiters, which not all companies are, or they've had a bad experience. And you can't really have a black and white approach to objection handling because you don't know what objection is going to come your way. You can prepare for every single one, but depending on the conversation at first, how you handle that objection is going to differ for every person. Blue collar conversation to a white collar conversation are two very different. Same thing with like a construction supervisor to a warehouse manager. Again, different types of conversations, two different types of ways you'd handle the objection, even if they have the same objection. It's just important to understand the foundational reasons as to why someone should use a recruiter or should take a candidate or whatever that might be, and believe it yourself as well as to just the benefits that you provide to helping a company build their teams and you know, build their business from a people's perspective the staffing perspective.
Absolutely. I think it takes a level of confidence as well as a recruiter. Like, you can be taught all the skill in the world, but the reality is it's not a scripted role. You nailed it when you said, right, each leader, whether it's a construction manager versus a warehouse manager, they may have the same objection, but you actually answer that very differently. So I think you need that level of confidence to back yourself and go out there and say, you know what, I don't know where this conversation's going to go or what the curveballs are going to be, but I know that I can handle it. Becoming somebody that's able to do that in terms of that personal development side of things, like, is there any practices, any habits that you have to really set yourself up for success mentally to take on the challenges of being a recruiter?
I think a lot of it does come down to experience, trial and error, whether that be, practicing yourself in front of a mirror or to yourself, record it is a great way to practice absolutely any kind of thing that you try to do, whether it's sales, customer service, whatever it might be. And as much as people hate to hear the sound of their own voice, you got to do it at some point, especially at the beginning. If you want to excel and succeed quite quickly, it's a very good way to do it. And you can work on your own pitch yourself. And you learn a lot about how you sound and the words that you say and how they come across. So there's a lot of different things like that as well. I mean, ask for feedback and seek feedback. I think the first couple of years in recruitment or sales is detrimental to just be a sponge and soak up as much information. Ask for feedback about anything you don't know. If you see someone doing well, ask them, the same kind of questions you're asking me at the end of the day, but get to know what makes them succeed, what they do that works for them, and take a little bit from everyone that's doing well. And you eventually take all the stuff that works for you and you become whatever makes you succeed in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you so much when you talked about recording yourself. Everything that I've been doing in the last year is just like recording myself on these YouTube videos, listening to it back. Sometimes they sound good and sometimes I'm like, what on earth am I talking about? And you can actually understand the way that you phrase things or if it doesn't make sense in what you're saying. So yeah, you can learn so much from that. Such an underrated tactic.
Because everyone hates listening to the sound of their voice and recording. I hate it too, but you got to look past that and just listen to the words and, how you sound, the tone, everything. It all makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually had people on the show and then after I put the episode up, I'll say, oh, what did you think of the episode? And they'll go, I haven't listened to it. Like, I can't listen to my own voice. And I'm like, just listen to it. You did so well. But it's funny, as recruiters, you'd think we'd love the sound of our own voice, but we just, we don't. It's a myth.
Yeah, me and phone calls as well. And outside of work and stuff, I always, for a long time, was like, I just don't like speaking to people on the phone. Like, just text me.
Really?
Even though I speak on the phone so much at work, and I don't think twice about it or anything like that at work, but sometimes at home, if people call me, I'll just like not answer it and just send a text. I'm just like, I can't bother to talk on the phone. You just kind of get through it. Not so much nowadays, but obviously, yeah.
Do you think that's because your social battery runs out because you're so social all day, just speaking to people all day, that it comes to the evening, you're like, nope, not dealing with anyone?
Absolutely. That definitely forms a part of it.
Yeah, it's exactly the same as me as well. It's like during the day, I'm so used to talking. At nighttime, I'm like, my phone is on airplane mode. Do not speak to me after 7 p.m. I am not available. We have to have our own things to keep us like mentally sane though, because it's in terms of like the pressure of the role on that mental side of things, like it can definitely take its toll if you don't look after yourself. Is that something you've ever experienced, or you're just getting on with it?
I think it's always kind of a bit challenging depending on the individual week and month. I mean, I've had a weird time recently, just being a bit. I don't know how to phrase it correctly, but overwhelmed or a little stressed for no reason. Worrying about, what I'm doing or how I'm doing or anything like that, even though I'm hitting some fantastic numbers and making some really decent commission, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes I go into a meeting with my manager and I'm like, oh, I'm nervous about this, and this, or I'm nervous about how they view my performance and stuff. And they're like, well, you like, commission, which, a lot of people don't. Some great numbers, you're doing everything right. And I'm like, well, that was very different to my perspective. But I think as a good recruiter and someone who's very driven and ambitious and stuff, we tend to always expect the best from ourselves. And what we expect from ourselves is so much higher than what others expect from ourselves. And a lot of the time, especially when you have great months where you might hit, 50 to 60, whatever K GP for a business. And then you hit a month where you hit 40K or 35K and you're like, oh, I'm not doing too well in the business. It's like, what do you mean? You just hit like 35 to 40K. What are you talking about? That's some great numbers.
Yeah.
But, different of perspective to how we view it ourselves, even though we know that, or we hear them say that they view it well.
The thing is, that's because the end result is the end result and it's a great result, but you've lived your life day in, day out, and you know the amount of difficult conversations that you've had. So sometimes it can feel overwhelming because it doesn't feel like, because let's just say hypothetically 50% of your calls were no's. There's like a bit of misalignment there, isn't there? You're hitting great figures, but you still feel like, no, I could be doing better. And that's where that comes from sometimes.
That plays a big part to it.
I assume, based on what you've said, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a couple of years into your career, you're billing about the $500,000 a year mark. Is that fairly accurate?
If you were to average out what I've built over the last 8 months to a full year mark, it would probably be plus minus 10% from there. Take as a very, very rough number. Potentially a bit less, but give or take. But that's mostly due to, I've been here for a year and a half. You start new industry, probably took 6 to 8 months to build up. I had accounts that I got to take over, but they were nowhere near what they're doing now back then. With the account that I've built with them over the last 6 to 8 months, and the new clients that we have and everything else with it. So that's that. A lot of that stuff's taken time to build up and get to a level where it's consistent across that side of the desk as well.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. I've had it in the past where recruitment agency clients will say to me, oh, if someone's not billing within 3 months, like we have to let them go. And I'm like, you're crazy, because it just takes 3 months to learn. If you're putting a consultant in that's never recruited that particular area before, it takes 3 months just to learn that, to be able to have the conversations with confidence. And then on top of that, you need the momentum and you need the touch points, right? So it definitely takes, I always say 6 to 9 months. And it sounds like your experience was fairly aligned to that as well. Is that, amazing.
Yeah, I definitely think that's important, especially if you're doing in the same space for that 6 to 9 month period. You kind of need it to, build a good relationship with your current clients, build a good relationship with new clients that you get along the way, and kind of, build the relationship with them, understand the market, but understand your clients as well. Takes a bit of time. What's a good candidate to them? What are the ins and outs of their job? Because a client will give you a job order, and then within the next 4 days, that job order has completely changed how it was when you first had that conversation. Think of that over 6 months, and it chops and changes so much. So you really get to understand the foundations of the businesses you work with, and that really does take a bit of time, because not everyone's a great communicator, especially in blue collar space. People aren't salespeople for the most part. You're dealing with people who are great for the operational side of things, but their bread and butter at the end of the day might be, construction, and that's what they're used to. Explaining the ins and outs to a recruiter at the level that a recruiter needs to best recruit for the job takes a fair bit of time, and you get to learn, through interview feedback and all the rest of it, what kind of what their ideal stuff that they're looking for is, and that does take a bit of time.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. Do you find in your space there's like a bit of a misconception around the recruitment industry or what recruiters do? Do you tend to find that you have to explain that process to them?
I think with a lot of the clients that I deal with or have dealt with, not so much. I think there's probably little pieces that they kind of pick up and understand the layers of what we do. The foundational level, all the ins and outs with the trickiness that we go through. I think a lot of people sometimes think that all recruiters just get CVs and send them through, and not everyone understands the process that a recruiter actually goes through, or a half-decent recruiter goes through with interviewing a candidate in the shortlisting process. You send 5 candidates forward, you've probably spoken to 20 candidates and reviewed 50 CVs through 5 candidates, and that might be 2 days worth of work, or however that might take, depending on the job and the intricacy of it. I think a lot of clients, for the most part, especially depending on the recruitment agencies and companies that they've dealt with in the past, don't always necessarily understand that, or if they haven't worked with recruitment before.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it.
They all hear it from each other. In the blue collar space, everyone knows someone, and they all that kind of stuff a lot, for the most part. So I definitely think that that's kind of there, and you've got like that Chinese whisper aspect to it, where they hear little bits and pieces from everywhere, and they have like a pre-existing thought process on what it's like, or what a recruiter does, for those that may not have worked with agencies before. I think these days a lot for sure, but
yeah, that's it. Do you find in your market that your clients are building internal recruitment teams and using agencies a little bit less, or not so much?
No, I mean, one of my highest billing clients that I have has an internal recruitment team, an internal HR team. And yeah, we just built a ridiculous amount with them in the last 12
Yeah.
months, which is great for us. But we do that because we're quick. We understand what they're looking for. They use other agencies as well. They recruit themselves. They do all that kind of stuff. I don't worry too much about that. I just worry about what I can control and fill the roles as much as I can, as quickly as I can, and build the best relationships I can. And generally, you find that if you're putting in the work and you're filling the roles quicker, you get benefits you don't even have to ask for from a lot of places.
Yeah, that's it. If we understand, we can address their skill gap, and we've also got the speed. That's what I always say to my recruitment clients is like, people will use you. Everyone wants the best hire. That's how businesses thrive, is because of the people. So yeah.
I was working with a company, or I am working with a company currently, but I was working on a couple of roles specifically over the last few weeks that went to myself and another agency. And I submitted probably like 7-8 candidates to them for 2 roles, same role to be fair, but 8 candidates for the 2 positions. And the other company sent through like 2 people. They had more time than I did, just due to when he was able to get in touch with myself and get my details, because he's new in the business there. And yeah, the candidates they sent through weren't good. They didn't send through many candidates. My candidates I sent through were all great. There was a bit of intricacies through the process, losing out to other opportunities and all the rest of it. Had another position pop up, same sort of thing. I submitted 3 candidates forward. All would have been great for the role. He would have taken them all if he had the positions open. The company sent one through, and the candidate apparently had a great CV that looked ideal for the role and everything. But the client said to me, because I asked for feedback on how the interview was, because he called me and he's like, yeah, we'll go for your candidate. So I was like, what happened with the other one? Because I was curious. And he said he reckons that, someone else probably made their CV and whatever else, because he just had to really fish out answers. The guy just wouldn't talk, basically. Just no good. And I didn't even ask anything about it, but he's like, yeah, look, I'm definitely just going to come to you next time. There's no point. I mean, we need candidates. We need to fill our roles quickly. We have a bit of a high turnover just with the industry that they're in. And yeah, that's basically just what he said. On anything like that, it just kind of came out just due to the work output that we had and the results that came with that.
Wow. And that is how you build like a brand as a recruiter as well, right? It's when you get to that place where you've proven yourself, and then they go, oh, you just make my life so much easier. I need to work with you. That's always the goal. Yeah. Wow. Well, it's great that you're getting to that point. I think that the first 2 years in recruitment are the hardest, because you're still getting your head around all of the moving parts, the desk, the industry, the relationships, and you're up against people that have got multiple years worth of relationships. So I feel like you're in that stage now where you're just about to go and just like blow up. So that's amazing.
The statistics around it, where like 70% of people that go into recruitment leave in the first 12 months, and 90% of people leave in the second year, something like that, which is just absurd. I mean, I think any career that you try to give, you should give it, 12 months, 2 years, something like that, whether you change companies, whatever it might be, because how are you going to judge something after doing it for 6 months? I'll never understand,
Yeah, that's it.
Specifically or whatever. It's just, you can't do much with 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. And you've braved the 2 years, so it's only up from here. I feel like, yeah, you're right. A lot of other recruiters, like, they'll let it go too early, and they won't give it a chance to see the fruitfulness of the career itself. Like, because it is tough at the beginning, but then once you've got your clients that come back to you again and again, once you've got your candidates that refer their friends to you, once you've got that network, you start to notice that billings become easier and faster. So you definitely get that pivotal sweet spot moment where, you set yourself up, you set your career up from there, and it's much easier.
Yeah, and I think you get used to the frustrations too that come with it. It's like working with labor hire space, for example. I was in shock at, I don't know how the most politically correct way I can say this is, but how silly some people are, how much some people can't follow instructions, or how some people don't show up to work and no show with no contact and all the rest of it. How much space. I mean, people will be desperate for work, and then you'll get them a job because they're about to be homeless. I mean, you get them a job anyway, but they complain about how they're about to be homeless and desperate for a job. You find them a job, and then they don't show up, and then they call you 2 weeks asking for a job again. You're like, well, mate, if you took this job, you'd probably still be working for my company because it's an ongoing role. Stuff happens, and then in time you just get used to it. Now it's just another day when that happens. I think recruitment's a lot like that as a whole. Different spectrums of things, but that's just
you kind of get desensitized to like the adversity as well. Like when you get those calls of a no-show, you're just like, oh, all right, next. Like within 2 minutes, you're just over it, right? But at first, it's like, oh my God, what's the client going to say? This is so stressful. Like, oh my gosh. But yeah, you do.
With some companies, I'm like, oh, look, I'm really sorry this happened. And most of them are like, look, it's no worries. Like it happens. It's not your fault or whatever. And I'm just like, I'm really sorry. Especially when you might have a string of them happen back to back. I think it's good to show a bit of remorse and still kind of build that relationship every day.
It's how you handle it. It's how you handle the communication.
The candidate from the company that brought them on as well. They're never not going to be able to put one-on-one together entirely, as much as they try to avoid it and understand. So I think it's to kind of try to build that relationship and make up for it, even though it's not entirely our fault, but accountability as well with clients, and it helps strengthen that relationship.
Absolutely, it does. And I think that's our opportunity to strengthen the relationship, is actually when something goes wrong. It's our opportunity to prove our consulting skills in that moment. I don't want to put you on the spot, but have you got any funny stories of like the funniest excuse that someone's ever made to not show up at work? Because if you don't, I've got one.
Under the sun. You have people who have had like 16 grandparents pass away.
Yeah.
A car broken down on the way to work, a car accident on the way to work. And some of this stuff might be true, but you get them a second chance to show up 2 days later and they don't show up. And you're like, well, that was probably a fib then. And it's annoying. It's so much worse when you try your best to give them a second chance and you just trust what they say and then they screw you over again. And you're like, well, I don't want to take this, and look badly on everyone that fibs or that has an excuse for not showing up to work. But when it happens so much, it gets a bit challenging. I think that's definitely in the blue collar labor hire space being so fast paced. But we definitely get a lot of that. We've had people send photos of like a wrecked car or whatever it might be, or a broken down car. And then we image it and it's just a photo taken from Google.
Oh God.
So all that stuff comes up all the time.
That's so funny that people have done that. I had one experience when I was working in agency, and it was a big agency. So there was like a lot of notes on the file, like, I don't know, 20 pages of notes or something. And I read back when this person let me down for like 3 years ago, and their parent had died like 7 times. Like their dad had died 7 times. And I was like, oh my gosh, like who says that? Like, fair enough. All right, your car broke down, whatever. We'll accept that excuse. But who says that their parent died? Like, it's actually crazy.
It's a crazy thing.
It's crazy. I had this other guy.
Funny too, if people just called us like the day before and they're like, hey, look, I've got this other job. I don't want to do it. This is the situation. We'll talk through it and it'll be okay. People who do stuff like that, we just end up marking as we're never going to use them again.
Yeah, you have to though, because if it's a letdown, it's a waste of your time going through the motions, right?
With your client, which destroys how much of a return on investment to the business that we work for. You kind of have to do that, as much as it's not necessarily an ideal thing, and it's bad for some candidates, but it's a bad image when they let you down once, when you try your best to get them an opportunity, especially ones that you might have to give a bit of consultation to a client to kind of work with and accept, and then they let you down. Like, well, I'm not going to do that again.
Look, it's the nature of the beast of what we do. However, I don't think I'll ever fully grasp it. I don't think I'll ever fully grasp when someone they've signed a contract, it's a permanent role, and they just no show on their first day. Like, what? Like, just send an email, Yeah,
I think it's definitely one of those things where, especially people like us who are ambitious and driven and care about our image to companies and people and our image as a whole and everything like that. It's something that's something we'd never think to do ever. It's crazy how often it happens. That perplexes us for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a little secret, and that's I recruit recruiters and recruiters do it to me. So it's like, you should know better. But anyway, that's another story. I have to tell you though, I did once have this guy who was like, you reminded me when you said they like say they've got no money or they're going to be homeless, etc. Same thing with this guy. He ultimately said that he had nothing, like he was getting kicked out, he couldn't pay his rent. So I was like, I'll get you a job. It was a junior role, decent money. And then he didn't show on the first day, and I called him and I was like, what happened? Like, where are you? And he was like, oh, I didn't have enough money to top up my Opal card. And I was like, huh? Like a job that's going to pay you like $400 a day or however much it was, but you couldn't find the $3 to top up your Opal to get $400. I was like, you should just bunk the train. Like just jump the gate for one day, get paid.
I've heard of people that did the exact same thing. And they're like, I don't have money for petrol to get to work. I don't have money to get to petrol for work. Like, honestly, if they just showed up the first day, I'd probably speak to our accounts team and just cash advance them $100.
Yeah,
If
100%.
they were just honest with me from the get-go. But when they're just like, sorry, mate, can't make it last minute, especially after they confirm it, because, we always do a phone call and a text message confirmation. And then the next day or the night before, the morning of, or sometimes no show at all. And then they're like, oh, I didn't have petrol or whatever it might be. You're like, mate, just text me. Like, we'll sort stuff out. Like, or at least
but
just
how
not
do they get paid? But then how do they ever buy petrol? Can you explain that to me? How do they get the money to pay for the petrol? It's like the chicken and the egg.
Yeah, I had this candidate a few weeks ago who was same thing as you just said, desperate for money. He was talking about being homeless. He no-showed an interview that I booked for him because he was about to be homeless and he needed money, and he got a call for a day labor. And this was a permanent role that I had, ongoing permanent role. And I was like, fair enough. Like, he no-showed, didn't let me know anything like that. Called him and he let me know that he got day labor and he had to take it because he was going homeless, all the rest of it. Spoke to my client, advising the situation. I was like, look, this is what's happened. He seemed pretty good up until now. Your call, what do you want to do? And he's like, yeah, look, we'll give him another chance. If he doesn't show up, then, he's obviously just taking the piss kind of thing. So we did. He went to the interview in the end, and he actually applied to my job, which I have like the pay rate in the job ad. I have the pay rate in the title in bold, like the main title, everything like that, as transparent as possible. He went into the interview, came out of it. Client was very happy, happy to offer him the job. And then he turned around and said, no, he doesn't want it because it doesn't pay enough. I think it was $29 an hour plus super as a permanent role, granted like a base level, entry level role. And he said, no, look, the lowest I can go is like $33 an hour for a role. And I'm like, how do you turn down a role that you've got that can start straight away? I get $4 an hour is a lot of money, don't get me wrong. But when you're about to be homeless or you're broke and begging for work because you're about to be homeless and so broke. Like, it's a multinational business by a global fair chunk of money business. Take the money, like, just do the job. You'd probably go 6 months and can probably get some really good progression and development out of it as well. And you've got annual leave, sick leave, all the rest of it. Like,
exactly.
But it's just the blue collar.
It's crazy, isn't it? I feel like we'll always, no matter how much experience we gain over the years, we'll always be faced with these challenges. But
as well, so perplexing. I'm like, how do you? I come across it every other week where people turn down pay rates, turn down jobs because the pay rate's $1 less than what they want, and they're not working, and they'd rather stay unemployed, hoping for something that pays more than take the job now. It's like because it pays $1 less, and it just makes no sense.
This is how my brain works, though. My brain is like, right, okay, $1 an hour less, that's $40 a week, that's $160 a month. Over the time span of a year, that is like nothing. That's like if I worked for 1 week sooner, if I took a job 1 week sooner, I would make the difference. Even if it's less money. So I'm like, I don't get it. Help me understand.
That kind of stuff. I mean, you have $40 a week, it's $22 a week or $35 a week, 30 to 35 after tax, depending on your tax bracket. But at that kind of wage, it's probably what it would be. It's not much.
100%.
I was missing for the petrol before.
What was that? Sorry?
I said it's the money that guy was missing for petrol before.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. But when I think about myself, I'm like, you know what? If I was on my ass, I'd do anything. Like, get me stacking shelves in Coles. I'm up for it. I don't care. I'll work anywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Money's money. Income's income. It doesn't really matter if it's a bit less, bit more. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, is what it is. So yeah, it's different mindset, I guess, isn't it? But in terms of wrapping up this, so honestly, you've added so much value. I love all of this advice that you've shared. And do you know what? The reality of being a recruiter as well, because I feel like sometimes we can feel alone when we're facing these challenges and nothing's going our way. So thank you for being honest in that sense as well.
Yeah, for that reason, it makes it really important as well to work in a company where you've got a good fit culture, good environment, good people that you feel comfortable to just talk to, have a laugh with. Be as productive as you can through the hours that need productivity, but it's helpful to have people that you can go to have a laugh with and share in the frustration, all that kind of stuff, because it makes it so much easier to go through it.
Yeah, culture and agency is so important, isn't it? Being around the right people. Yeah.
I mean, and companies can have a great culture, but it's not always the right culture for you as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely important to understand the difference between that as well, because I think sometimes some people might go into a company and see the great culture that's there, but it might not be the right culture for them, and it affects their billings, it affects their performance in the space, and they blame recruitment and leave the space and don't go back. And I think people need to, maybe if recruitment's not working for them, try a different desk. If that doesn't work, try a different company, try a different culture. There's definitely a high likelihood that something's out there for you, especially if you like the sales aspect of it and speaking to helping people find jobs, and then the financial side of it, which should be a big goal, aspiration, one part to it for sure. But I definitely think a lot of that stuff makes the difference, and can help people not leave too early.
Yeah, absolutely. And every desk is so different. Like every desk I've ever done in the past is like a totally different job. It's handled so differently. The clients are different. The conversations are different. So yeah, don't throw the towel in too soon.
Yeah. And that's what I like about desk as well. Sorry. Is that aspect of things as well, is that both the perm and labor hire are two very different things with the recruitment aspects to it. And I enjoy doing both for a lot of reasons, but a big part to it is that aspect that it feels like you're doing something different every day, and doing very different processes for different roles all at the same time. So you kind of get a really good mix and variety of it, which would be the same sort of thing if you did different industries, or that varied in industries quite a lot. That definitely helps as well.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. Well, in terms of the final question, so I ask everyone that comes onto this podcast towards the end, what are the top 3 pieces of advice you would give to recruiters who are really looking to excel or accelerate their careers? What would your top 3 pieces of advice be?
I think it's a funny thing being able to give advice to people who excel in recruitment. There's plenty of things you can do. I think the biggest challenge with that question is, what are the top 3? Is probably the biggest challenge to answering that question. There's heaps of things that are important. Resilience is definitely a big one. But I definitely think having ambition, or being money driven or focused, or having that kind of attitude is a big factor to it. That can definitely help, especially get through a lot of those tough times, because the benefit of the good times as well. When you have a great month or a great quarter, whatever the business structure might be, the benefits that come with that definitely help a lot. I think what I mentioned before about understanding that what might be or seem like a great culture isn't always the right culture for you, and that might be why your billings or your performance might not be that great. And meaning that maybe it's not the fact that recruitment's not for you, maybe it's just that business or that culture or that environment's not for you. Don't be afraid to jump to a different agency if you feel the culture's not right for you or you don't fit in. The right environment can really help you excel in the space and in recruitment as a whole. I think it can make a difference beyond what most people might believe or think. It's definitely worth doing that and giving that a chance before you leave the space as a whole, because a lot of the people that leave the space don't generally come back. If you're going to give it a chance, give it everything you've got. Don't bow out before you might make $100,000 or $200,000 in a year, because it's definitely the place for it. The other, I don't know what else I would say. I mean, the other little pieces I would probably say is just be a sponge for the entirety that you're in recruitment. Always be learning, always be taking things from other people, whether it's your junior or your senior. I think a lot of juniors come from different space. Everyone has different experience and different backgrounds that you can take pieces from. Might not be recruitment specific, but it might be communication. It might be, something completely different. And definitely learn from all the seniors and all the people who are excelling, succeeding in your business, succeeding around you. Use the tools that you have, like LinkedIn and stuff like that. I mean, I learn lots of tiny little bits and pieces from just scrolling through LinkedIn and having connections with a bunch of people in the space. You pick up so much stuff from all those little. Well, and it's important to take it on and just always have that mindset that recruitment is an ever changing, ever growing space. It's always changing. You're never going to be an expert, and just keep learning and keep growing, and to maintain success throughout the space.
Amazing. Such great advice. And you are way beyond your years, by the way. Like you're speaking like a consultant that has 5+ years experience or more, to be honest. I feel like it takes some people so long to learn that that's the way it is. So yeah, so much value in your experience. And thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for being on the podcast as well. I appreciate your time and I wish you all the best with your desk.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marcus.